Hello and welcome to Sweet Vegan Spills the Tea podcast. I am Jennifer June Chapman and I am so happy to be here. I am also just realizing how incredibly bright the lights around me are right now. It's obnoxious, but I'm not going to stop recording to adjust them because I just have this small window to record in. And it's been a minute since the last episode, like a stretch. And I'd rather spend this time talking to you than fiddling with lights. It's been a while since I recorded the last episode because I was wrapping up the end of part of my program at school, and I had a bunch of case studies to do that were very challenging and time-consuming, but also super interesting and inspiring, and part of the reason why I chose heart health and heart disease as today's topic. And here's why. While I was looking for participants to be case studies, I spoke to some people who had already signs of early heart disease and even had already had heart attacks. And I say already because these people were in their 30s and 40s and early 50s. And this surprised me. And I know a lot about heart disease, but I didn't know how early in life it actually begins. But I did some digging, and it turns out that in the United States, about 65% of 12 to 14-year-olds already have early signs of heart disease. 12 to 14-year-olds. And not only that, but by age 10, children eating the standard American diet already have fatty streaks in their arteries. In obese children, I think it's as early as 8 years old. And narrowing of the arteries related to heart disease can begin as early as in utero. That means before you were even born, especially if the mother has really high cholesterol while she's pregnant. A lot of people don't know this, and a lot of people don't realize how preventable this is, or even reversible it can be sometimes. A lot of people just sort of assume that heart disease or heart attacks are just sort of a common thing that happens in aging, which it is, but it doesn't have to be. And they just sort of accept it for what it is. And they wait until they're middle-aged, if at all, to start trying to take steps to prevent that from happening, which is great. It's never too late to take these steps. I'm just saying, but a lot of people assume that this doesn't even start happening until then in life. I'm young, I'll be fine, blah, blah, blah. But as I said, it can start before you're even born. And depending on what you're eating, you can have very visible signs of it. I mean, not on the outside, obviously, but internally, at an incredibly young age. So most of us know that heart disease and heart attacks exist. And most people have talked about it in one way or another, whether they're being flippant and referring to their nachos and their wings and their pizza as a heart attack on a plate, or whether they're just saying, I don't know, whatever. I don't want to make stuff up. But anyway, everyone pretty much knows that it exists, but not everyone even really knows what it is, much less the fact that they can prevent it or possibly even reverse it. So we'll start with what it is. Cardiovascular disease is actually a group of disorders primarily affecting the blood vessels that supply your heart and your brain. The most common ones being coronary heart disease, where the vessels that supply your heart become damaged, become clogged up, or even completely blocked. And then in the case of ischemic stroke, it's when the same thing happens to the blood vessels that are supplying your brain. So the way that happens is there are endothelial cells that line the inner wall of the blood vessel, and those cells can become damaged by any number of things that I will get into in detail in a little bit. But basically things like environmental toxins, poor nutrition, poor lifestyle, etc. When that happens, cholesterol particles, which are low density lipoproteins or LDL cholesterol, can burrow across those endothelial cells and into the wall of the blood vessels. And when they do that, they become oxidized, and that starts a whole inflammation process. And this calls in more cells to the wall of the vessel, which then creates more oxidative stress, which then causes more inflammation and increasing the damage to your endothelial cells. And as a result, more cholesterol particles get in. And this sort of pattern continues and creates the building of plaque, which thickens the blood vessel and makes it more and more narrow. All right, so what damaged those endothelial cells in the first place? These are common threats that contribute to the risk of developing heart conditions. So first of all, there's genetics. So people who genuinely just have a predisposition for certain chronic diseases. But I want to remind you that just because you have a tendency or a predisposition doesn't mean that you will suffer from it to the same extent as anyone else in your family did. Your lifestyle choices will have a huge impact on how affected you are. So for example, if your dad was prone to heart attacks, but he ate tons of processed foods and fast foods, and he led a really sedentary lifestyle, and he smoked like crazy and drank like a fiend, but you are relatively active and eat really healthily, chances are you won't be affected the same way by this same disease or this same predisposition. High blood pressure. When we have high blood pressure, this stiffens and narrows the vessels, and blood and oxygen flow to our key organs decreases. And so then the heart tries harder to pump that blood through your body, which then further increases your blood pressure and increases the force with which it uses to pump that blood through your arteries, and that can damage the artery walls. In short, should we talk about cholesterol? Get that out of the way. Cholesterol actually plays a really important role in helping us digest our food and make hormones and absorb vitamin D and all kinds of good stuff. And our bodies are pretty good at making it. The thing is, there's more than one kind of cholesterol. And you've probably heard people refer to the good cholesterol versus the bad cholesterol. So the bad cholesterol is referring to that LDL cholesterol, or low density lipoprotein, that we talked about earlier, invading the walls of your vessels and arteries and creating all kinds of havoc. The thing about LDL cholesterol is if it's elevated beyond what is considered normal or healthy levels, it increases your risk for heart disease. And the longer it stays elevated, the higher your risk becomes. So in short, elevated LDL cholesterol causes cardiovascular disease. The good cholesterol would be the HDL cholesterol, and that's your high density lipoproteins. And they're sort of soft, and they bump around inside you and can't actually really permeate the lining or lodge into your artery walls. So you would probably think that if HDL is good cholesterol, then the higher it is, the better it is for you. But actually, it's not, it's not necessarily the case. What's important here, first of all, is that there's a good balance between your HDL and your LDL. So the ratio is super important, because this reflects whether or not cholesterol is being deposited into your tissues or being broken down and excreted the way it's supposed to be. This is to say that it's not necessarily about how high your HDL cholesterol is, but how effective it is being at doing its job. So yes, I think that's good. I think we're going to leave it there, and we're going to move on to high triglycerides. Okay. Triglycerides are fats, lipids that are found in your blood. Basically, when you eat, your body converts any calories that it doesn't need into triglycerides, and they are stored in your fat. And later, in between meals, when you need that energy, your hormones will release them. The thing is that if you consistently overeat or eat or take in more calories than you need or can burn, you end up with high triglycerides. And high triglycerides contribute to the hardening of your arteries and the narrowing the narrowing of the artery walls, which sort of segues also into excess body weight and obesity, in that people who carry a lot of excess body weight, especially for prolonged periods of time, often end up having high triglycerides. They also need more blood to supply oxygen and nutrients to their bodies. And then also they require more pressure to pump that blood through their body, which then results in high blood pressure. So now we have high triglycerides and then we have high blood pressure, which are two majorly contributing factors to the risk of developing heart disease, as is high blood sugar, which can damage your blood vessels and the nerves that control your heart. Also, inflammation is a response that can eventually damage healthy cells and tissues and organs if you have it chronically or for prolonged periods of time. People with diabetes are also quite likely to have other conditions that raise the risk of heart disease, like high blood sugar and high blood pressure. Another contributing factor is physical inactivity. The heart is a muscle, and just like any other muscle in your body, it needs to be exercised. Muscles need to be exercised in order to be strong and healthy. And if you don't use them, if you don't exercise them, they become weak and they begin to atrophy. And that is a terrible thing to do to your heart, your beautiful beating heart. Stress. According to a Johns Hopkins University study that appears in today's archives of internal medicine, I'm reading this from my notes. Men who rate themselves as generally angry on questionnaires given early in life are, by the age of 55, men who rate themselves as generally angry on questionnaires given early in life. Oh yeah, that's right. So they were given the questionnaires early in life. And then later, by the age of 55, they were found to be 6 times more likely to have a heart attack than other men. So stop being angry, guys. You're giving yourself a heart attack. Stress is terrible. Stress causes inflammation. Stress makes it really hard for you to sleep, as we just talked about. Stress causes you to indulge in all kinds of self-soothing, bad lifestyle choices that I'm about to get into in just a second. And all of these things contribute to the risk of developing heart disease. You have to find a way to manage your stress. You have to, whether you are meditating or exercising or doing yoga, getting therapy, finding a friend to talk to and process your feelings with, or whatever you need to do. Definitely, you need to have tools to manage stress. Inflammation. Chronic inflammation injures the lining of your arteries, and then your body tries to fix that by putting little band-aids on it. And then the more inflammation you have, the kind of more these little band-aids are put on, and the more that continues, and the more that those little band-aids accumulate, the more you obstruct your blood flow, because you're potentially building up on the plaque on your arteries. And as we know, this can lead to angina, heart attack, stroke, etc. All right, so let's talk about drinking and smoking. Those are two of the lifestyle choices that I was referring to earlier. So let's hit those. Excessive alcohol use. Well, you know what? Even if you just have 4 drinks one time, like right now, if you were to just drink 4 drinks right now, you could quite potentially have an irregular heart rhythm from that. It's not permanent, but it would happen. So your heart is immediately affected by it. If you drink excessively or consistently for long term, it can also raise your blood pressure and weaken your heart, therefore making it much harder for your heart to do its job. And we don't want that. Smoking, horrible for your heart. It increases the formation of plaque in the blood vessels, and the chemicals in cigarette smoke causes the blood to thicken and form clots inside the veins and the arteries. Don't smoke. Don't do it. I've told you before. I'm telling you again. Just don't smoke. Some birth control has been linked to blood clots in the arteries. So while it's rare and generally healthy, young women, estrogen-based oral contraceptives have been found to increase the risk of these clots forming. So you should definitely avoid taking them if you are at risk for having blood clots or have a history of blood clots, have migraine with aura, have uncontrolled blood pressure, are over 35 years old, have excessively, are excessively overweight or obese, have metallic valves or poor heart function. I just can't talk anymore. Have liver disease, have circulatory issues, any heart rhythm problems. If you smoke and take birth control, if you do those two things, you quadruple your chances of getting heart disease. Here's a weird one: antiseptic mouthwash. Well, I don't know if it's weird, but it's not commonly talked about, and I only just heard about it recently, but apparently your blood pressure goes up when you use it. Something to do with the connection between the oral microbes and systemic blood flow and blood pressure regulation. So I just learned that. Antiseptic mouthwash makes your blood pressure go up. Prolonged or frequent use of antibiotics also increase your risk for heart disease because systemic antibiotics kill the good bacteria in your oral cavity. Also, prescription proton pump inhibitors. I hate these guys. I hate them so much. I have talked about them on our episode that was about the gut-brain connection. This is antacids and things like Pantaloc, for example. And I am not telling you never to take them. If you need to, absolutely take them, take them. If you are taking a medication that is going to ravage your gut, and the only way you can stop that from happening is by also taking Pantaloc, take it. But please don't just chomp on Tums or Rolaids or whatever all willy-nilly just because you have a stomach ache. I've talked about this before. I'm not even going to get into it. It's just so terrible for you. It is bad for you, and it messes with your microbiome. It messes with the optimization of your stomach acids, and it also eliminates the blood pressure lowering effects of nitrite and nitrate. And according to Dr. Nathan Bryan, people who have been on antacids for 3 to 5 years have about a 35% higher incident of heart attack and stroke, period. I'm going to talk about diet for a minute, which is my area of expertise as a Nutritherapy practitioner, as a holistic nutritionist. And I'm also going to refer back to the top of the episode when I said that it was in looking for potential case studies that I became inspired to choose this topic for today. I spoke to more than one person who felt that they needed help because they had recently had heart attacks, and more than one of those people who had recently been on a keto diet, so a high fat, low carb diet. And while they were in the hospital, they ate what was provided for them. But now that they were back home, they were planning to go back on the keto diet because they had lost weight on this diet. While weight loss absolutely is a very helpful way to, or at least one of the helpful steps to preventing heart disease and even reversing it for some people, a weight loss plan that is high in saturated fats contributes to your likelihood of developing all kinds of diseases, including cancers and heart disease, the disease that you're trying so hard to prevent. And I'll explain that in a second. But the thing is that I know that that can be really challenging because as people, we want to see results. Literally, we want to visibly see results. So if you are trying to prevent heart disease by losing weight, and you are seeing yourself losing weight, you can literally see yourself getting smaller. You can see the number on the scale getting smaller. That can be incredibly validating, and that is a great thing. But the thing you can't see is the effects that all those saturated fats are having on the inside of your body, the effects that those saturated fats are having on your endothelial cells or on your arteries or on your actual heart, the muscle. And I do not want to discourage people at all from, experimenting with different ways to lose weight. I just would really like to reinforce how important it is to do your research. And it can be extremely difficult because there are plenty of people online telling you that there's tons of scientific evidence showing you that keto and paleo and Atkins and whatever other high saturated fat diets that are out there are beneficial. And I get that it's not easy to know which articles are scholarly and which ones are opinion pieces. But it's your life. It's really, 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 really important that you find a credible source of information. And also, by the way, just as a side note, traditionally, dietary patterns that are high in carbohydrates are associated with low rates of coronary heart disease. So in a lot of countries that eat a lot of rice and grains and cereals and root crops, like in Asia, different parts of Africa, and so on. Okay. So in short, while weight loss can be helpful for people who are excessively overweight or obese in regards to preventing or reversing heart disease, and while diets like keto, Atkins, paleo seem to be effective ways of losing weight for some people, so are, as Dr. Dean Ornish likes to point out, taking amphetamines, smoking cigarettes, and chemotherapy, which can all also be very terribly, horribly destructive and even fatal. So yes, weight loss can be an excellent way to prevent, reduce, and even recover from heart disease, but there are much, much healthier ways to do it than high fat, low carb diets. So let's just go a little deeper and talk about which dietary choices actually increase our chances of developing heart disease. I'm going to start with saturated fats, since I just mentioned them a second ago. And I'm going to tell you that there is a clear and consistent correlation between eating saturated fats and high LDL cholesterol. And there is overwhelming scientific data that elevated LDL cholesterol causes heart diseases, including heart attack and stroke. Saturated fat, elevated LDL cholesterol, heart disease. Fact. I don't know if you remember this, but in 2014, Time magazine had, the cover was just like a picture of a curl of butter, and it said "butter is back," and the subheading said "scientists labeled fat the enemy, but they were wrong." And the New York Times also put out an article around the same time that said butter is back. Julia Child, goddess of fat, is beaming somewhere. Anyways, these articles, and probably many others, were based on meta-analysis that was horrifically flawed, full of errors and full of omissions, and has been completely debunked by plenty of qualified physicians, scientists, whatever. Sadly, despite the many credible and qualified statements against this like pro saturated fat movement, the internet is flooded with all kinds of articles quoting this meta-analysis. And if you if you go on the internet right now and just Google, saturated fat is not bad for me or something like that, you will definitely find op-eds that tell you to go ahead and eat all the butter that you want, and that it's just a load of crap, and saturated fat's not so bad, and all that kind of stuff. The internet will definitely tell you that. But before you listen to the internet, I just want to tell you also that the internet told me that the reason why I had these like dark purple circles on the bottom of the ball of my foot about 10 years ago was because I had AIDS. And so, of course, I was terrified, and I ran to the doctor and showed him and explained my diagnosis to him. And he recommended that rather than going on antiretroviral therapy medication, that I just either buy insoles or get rid of the brand new boots that I had just bought that were bruising the soles of my feet. The internet will tell you all kinds of crap is what I'm trying to tell you. And I am just going to ask you again. I just talked about it when I talked about the keto Atkins paleo thing. Just be super, super, super sure that your source is credible before you act on it. It's your health. You have to be careful. If it was your child, you wouldn't just take the internet's word for it. If it was your dog, you probably wouldn't even take the internet's word for it. So don't mess around with your own health. All right, there's also trans fats. I won't get super deep into it, but basically trans fats is where, well, it's where they took liquid fats like vegetable oils and hydrogenated them so they would be semi-solidified. And the purpose of this was to prolong the like freshness of packaged and processed foods. And they are terrible for you. They are even worse for you than saturated fats are. The World Health Organization has basically pled with the world to ban them. I think the limitations were minute, like the amount, not the limitations, but the amount that they would recommend you allow was tiny. Denmark was the first country to ban the sale of any fats or oils containing more than 2 grams of trans fats per 100 grams. Countries in Europe and North America followed suit. And I think in Canada, we either completely banned them or almost entirely have banned them. So you probably won't be overly exposed to them anyways. But if you hear people talking about trans fats, they're just liquid vegetable oils that have been hydrogenated into semi-solid oils, and they are terrible for you. In fact, sorry, I know I said I was not going to get into it, but I just also wanted to tell you that trans fat not only elevates your LDL cholesterol, but it lowers your HDL cholesterol. So it lowers what we referred to earlier as your good cholesterol as well. So not helpful, probably not a huge issue for you, but there are still countries that have not put regulations on it. So trans fat, bad. Salt. While we do need some sodium in our diet, when we have excess sodium in our diet, we retain excess water, and that makes it really hard for our kidneys to get rid of, and that elevates our blood pressure. Eggs. Eggs are a very rich source of dietary cholesterol. A single egg has about 207 milligrams of cholesterol, which has been well established to raise our blood cholesterol, which we talked about earlier. Sugar. We all know sugar is not good for us. We know how terrible. I'm talking about refined sugar. I'm not talking about a plum. I'm not talking about actual sugar that's in a whole food that you eat. I'm talking about refined sugars. They are terrible for you. They are highly inflammatory, and we know inflammation is not good. They totally mess with your gut microbiome, which we already know is not good. And they also increase our triglyceride levels, contribute to insulin resistance, and all kinds of other garbage that your heart wants nothing to do with. And that's it. I also want you to be mindful of the fact that many pre-made and processed foods, especially fast foods, contain many, if not most, or even all of the foods that contribute to your risk of developing heart disease. So for example, one fast food type breakfast sandwich, like your tip standard egg McMuffin or whatever sausage egg sandwich thing, contains all of the top foods that cause heart disease. So if you have a white English muffin, so you have refined flour, refined sugars, you probably have some kind of mayo or dip that has either vegetable oil or tropical oil. Then on top of that, you have the egg and the bacon or the sausage. So that's like saturated fat, cholesterol, and then possibly even cheese on top of that, which again is full of saturated fat. Remember earlier when I just sort of made that flippant remark about how people say, oh, that's a heart attack on a plate, or that's a heart attack waiting to happen? It's your standard fast food breakfast sandwich. One unhealthy meal can block blood vessel function for up to 6 hours. That's just one meal. Imagine eating an unhealthy meal for breakfast, and then another one at lunch, and then another one at dinner, or just a couple unhealthy meals a day, or even just one unhealthy meal most days of the week. And some people eat unhealthy meals for every meal, every day of the week. 6 hours, one meal. All right, look, there are some common medical treatments for heart disease. I won't go super deep into them because I am not a heart surgeon or medical doctor. What? I know. I will say that there are medications that are prescribed, sometimes unnecessarily, where the risks outweigh the benefits because, well, not because, but also that the root of the problem is not being fixed. It's the statin is just sort of acting as a Band-Aid. But in other circumstances, for example, where somebody's heart condition has progressed to the point where it's dangerous, these medications can be life-saving. So what they do basically is they block the enzyme that creates cholesterol, and they also help reabsorb already existing cholesterol that's in the system. So that's how those work. And there are also non-emergency stents, which is, I think, one of the most common invasive procedures in the United States. And honestly, they seem to offer no benefit for angina pain at all. I can't. And of course, in an emergency situation, there are a number of different surgical procedures that are done. So these are all invasive and include things like tubing and catheters and stents and lasers and drilling and cutting and muscle or heart transplanting. And I'm not going to describe them all because, as I said, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a heart surgeon, and also because it's long and it's gross. Also, I'm a Nutritherapy practitioner, and I would rather spend my time telling you what to watch for and how you can prevent it and recover faster from it and even reverse it. Right, so things to look out for: fluttering feeling in the chest, heart palpitations, shortness of breath, extreme fatigue, swelling of the feet, the ankles, the legs, the abdomen, the neck veins, poor circulation, erectile dysfunction. It's not just about the flow to your heart or your brain or your extremities. It's also the blood flow to your extremities. So, I mean, to your sex organ. So please don't just take a Viagra, go to the doctor. Women also, if women don't have the blood flow needed for vaginal arousal or lubrication or even orgasm, this is something to go to the doctor about. Do not ignore these symptoms. Symptoms of a stroke, a sudden numbness or weakness in the face, the arm, the leg, sudden confusion, trouble seeing, trouble walking, severe headache with no known cause. And then symptoms of an actual heart attack, extreme fatigue, also nausea, indigestion, burping, vomiting, dizziness, short breath, chest pain, pressure with the pain spreading to the shoulders, the neck, the arms, the jaw, sweating, shortness of breath, if I didn't already say that. But I want to point something out. Those are general symptoms of a heart attack. Okay, listen, please, because this is very, very important. The symptoms for women can be very different than they are for men. In men, the cholesterol clumps commonly in the artery. And in women, instead of one big clump, it can spread through the vessel. So both cause damage, but the warning signs can be very different and they can be very subtle for women. In fact, women can experience a heart attack without feeling any pain or pressure in the chest at all. And the symptoms for women can seem more like a flu. So like lightheadedness and dizziness and shortness of breath and extreme fatigue, sometimes pain in the upper abdomen or upper back. The other thing is women are also less likely to be taken seriously at the emergency room when they go in with symptoms of a heart attack. And by less seriously, I mean are more likely to be told that they're having anxiety or that they've pulled a muscle. And generally speaking, doctors in the ER are not as quick to look for the diagnosis of a heart attack in a woman. And this is even more so if you're a younger woman. Even though it's estimated that about a quarter of women who die of heart disease are between the ages of 35 and 44, women under the age of 75 are twice as likely to die than men, because doctors often misdiagnose women because they're not looking for a heart attack. So I cannot stress enough to you that if you have any symptoms that you suspect might be heart disease, might be a heart attack, do not take no for an answer. Insist that they check you. All right, now I'm going to tell you what you can do about it. This is the best part, because this is the part where we empower you, because it is possible to prevent heart disease, and it is definitely possible to treat it and also sometimes even reverse it. Are you ready for this? I have a long, beautiful, gorgeous list laying right in front of me. I'm going to read it to you, and it's going to sound like this. First, eat plenty of fruit. So easy. Daily intake of fruit may decrease the risk of heart disease by as much as 40%. Doesn't that make you want to go grab an apple right now? No, you hate apples? Apples make you have to poop? That's okay. That happens to a lot of people. Have a plum or an orange or something else that you like. You know what I like? Peaches and raspberries. Add at least one serving of nitrate-rich veg to your already existing diet. What is nitrate-rich veg? Well, natural nitrate-rich vegetables include green leafy vegetables like spinach, mustard greens, arugula, kale, Swiss chard, lettuce, also beetroot, radishes, turnips, watercress, bok choy, Chinese cabbage, kohlrabi, chicory leaf, celery, onions, garlic. Those are all nitrate-rich foods. Have as big a percentage of your dietary intake comprised of plant-based whole foods as possible. Why? I'm so glad you asked. First of all, there's evidence that when you eat a plant-based diet, it is more difficult for LDL particles to become oxidized. Do you remember when we talked about that at the beginning, at the top of the show? Yep, because you have a big brain. That's right. Also, a plant-based diet rich in potassium improves your blood pressure. It is rich in high fiber foods, which can help lower cholesterol. It is typically low in saturated fats and cholesterol. Plant-based diets help reduce inflammation. And according to a meta-analysis published in the International Journal of Epidemiology, replacing protein from eggs, processed meat, poultry, and other animal-based products with nuts, legumes, and whole grains lowers the risk of heart disease and death by up to 54%. That's right. Go get that plum. In the documentary, The Game Changers, they served meals to 3 professional athletes that were animal-based, and a different night, I don't remember which night was which, if the meat was the first night or the plant-based was the first night, but one night they ate meat for dinner and the next night they ate plant-based for dinner, or vice versa. The thing is, they monitored these 3 athletes throughout the night, 3 young, fit athletes. They monitored them all night. And the night that they ate the plant-based meal before retiring for the evening, the men had, I think, 300 to 500% more erections than they did the night that they had an animal based meal. And I think it was it was like 15% harder erections as well. It's just one meal. To quote physician, author, former Olympic rowing champion, and the director of the heart disease reversal program at the Cleveland Clinic, Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, some people think plant-based diets, whole food diets, is extreme. 500,000 people a year will have their chests opened up and a vein taken from their leg and sewn onto their coronary artery. Some people would call that extreme. All right, let's get through these hot tips, shall we? So swap out meat for legumes or tofu or tempeh. So by legumes, I mean black beans, lentils, chickpeas, etc. You don't have to change up your recipe. You can use the same sauce or the same spices. So for example, if you were going to make a Cajun chicken for supper tomorrow night, try making it with chickpeas or make Cajun tofu instead. Swap out empty carbs. So refined processed flours, white rice, white bread, white pasta, so on, with anything made of whole grains or for a whole grain. So like quinoa, bulgur, spelt, try whole grain pasta, try whole grain bread instead. When you're making desserts, swap out the refined sugar by sweetening the food with date sugar or dates or applesauce or bananas. There's tons of recipes online. There are countless recipes online for super tasty desserts that have 0 sugar in them. And please do not use a sugar replacer. I'm talking about using an actual whole food as a sweetener. Let's see what else. Replace vegetable oil and tropical oil-based salad dressings by using lemon juice or apple cider vinegar or balsamic with herbs and spices. If you want to make a creamy dressing, you can just mash some avocado or some soft tofu, creamed cashews, nutritional yeast. There's all kinds of tasty alternatives for your salad dressing that have 0 oil in them. And I will put some recipes up in the show notes for you so you can have a couple of examples of that. I just want to say though, quickly, if I didn't already say this, I don't think I did. If you already have heart disease, or if you are recovering now from heart disease, I would recommend you avoid avocado, nuts, and seeds for the moment, because they do have some saturated fats in them and they're really great for you. And I highly recommend them for those of you who do not have heart disease or are not recovering from heart disease. But for those of you who are or have a heart condition, I would recommend avoiding avocado, nuts, and seeds for the moment. Okay, so saute in a little bit of water or vegetable broth instead of using oil. So that might not sound very appetizing, but I do it often and it's just as tasty. So you'll be fine. It's just like a little water saute. It's even tastier if you use a broth, but if you love fried food, invest in an air fryer or try baking things in the oven instead. You can still make those tasty coatings and stuff like that, but just don't cook it in a pool of oil. If you usually put cream cheese or butter on your bagels or your toast, try using hummus or veggie pate or even mashed banana with some cinnamon instead of the cream cheese or instead of the butter. To reduce the amount of sodium in your diet, first of all, read your labels. Read them carefully. I had a client with kidney stones who didn't think she was adding any sodium to her diet. But when I asked her to show me her favorite seasoning that she uses, it was the first ingredient was salt. And it was so, I can't remember the exact list of ingredients, but it was so simple. It was something like salt, turmeric, like cumin and parsley flakes and pepper, let's say. Like it was something so simple. Like she could find all those other ingredients so easily and probably so much cheaper at the grocery store, and then at least be in control of how much the salt was going in. So she stopped buying that seasoning and just bought the ingredients that were in the seasoning. So if you have a favorite seasoning or vegetable broth and you look on the ingredients, you may see that it's really easy for you just to recreate that same sort of recipe without all the added salt, because you don't actually know exactly how much is in there. Anyways, what was I talking about? Oh, yes. Experiment with fresh and dried herbs, spices, peppers, and aromatic vegetables like leeks and onions and garlic and celery, peppers, lemongrass, ginger. If you use herbs and spices and aromatics, you won't need to rely so much on the fats and the salt to flavor your food, because your food will taste amazing. Of course, drink alcohol in moderation. We talked about that. Reduce or limit your consumption. Weird. I don't know what kind of weird slip that was, but I was trying to say reduce or limit your consumption of coffee to 1 cup a day. Taste your food before you add the salt. I should have added that onto the salt one. If you are eating vegan cheeses, okay, here's something I want you to pay attention to. Some of them are really just made with cashews or potato starch and very little other ingredients, sometimes no oil, but some of them have a lot of tropical oil in them, like coconut oil, which is basically 90% saturated fat. So please, if you are buying vegan cheeses, don't just assume because it's vegan that it's healthy. There are so many processed vegan foods out there. We don't have time to talk about that today. I will do an episode about it. But in the meantime, just please flip the cheese over and read the ingredients. If you're just seeing like all kinds of different like kinds of oil, it's not the cheese for you. Skip it. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to give you some recipes for some vegan cheeses soon, but not today, not the day that the episode drops. I don't have time. But very soon. So keep your eyes open. If you like to make your own stuff. If not, there are some really great nut-based cheeses and potato-based cheeses out there that are not packed with oil. So just have a look around for them. Where were we? Oh, yes. I wrote a post just recently. Was it a post? It was not. It was in the autumn 2021 edition of the Sweet Vegan Spills the Tea digital magazine, which is free and on the website at sweetvegan.net, but I'll put a link in the show notes. I wrote an article about turning routine into ritual. And it's just like a short little article about sort of lightening your load a bit and feeling a bit less burdened by the things that you have to do in a day and turning them more into sort of acts of self-care. So for those of you who are into that kind of stuff, that's there for you. And why am I talking about spirituality and ritual? Oh, stress reduction. We talked about that. Just finding a way to connect and get grounded. Move your body. We talked about exercising. When your heart is exercised, it can pump more blood through your body more efficiently. Regular exercise helps keep your arteries and your other blood vessels flexible. So you have good blood flow and normal blood pressure. Exercise stimulates nitric oxide, which keeps your blood vessels open, which is great. And in fact, exercising for as little as 20 minutes a day can decrease inflammation. You don't have to do like a high impact, crazy CrossFit workout or anything. You can just go for, a good steady paced walk. It's great for you. Walking is amazing for you. Walking is so good for you. Go grab an apple or a plum and go for a walk as soon as this is done, but not yet. Just hang on. We're almost done. Oh my gosh, you know what? We are done. We're done. That was it. I just wanted you to go for a walk. I want you to eat a fruit and go for a walk and take super, super, super good care of your heart. All right. Well, then that's a wrap. Thank you so much for taking time to listen to this or to watch this today. I really appreciate it. I had so much fun doing this. And until next time, take really good care of yourselves. Bye.